I want to talk now about the speech that Trump delivered after his arrest and arraignment in New York City, and he afterwards flew to Florida and spoke at Mar-a-Lago. And it went horribly, terribly wrong for him and anyone who wanted this to be his moment to make his case for why this is political persecution and all these different things. And it was a faceplant. He wasn't able to do that because, and I'll get to the part that I'm referring to, it's like the speech got distracted and all of a sudden we're talking about these things which don't help Trump's case. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But first, to kind of walk through topically, starting with him addressing the thing he's been indicted for and got arrested for in New York, the Stormy Daniels hush money payment case. Take a look.
But now they have really stepped up their efforts by indicting the 45th president of the United States, who received $75 million votes, which is more than any sitting president in the history of our country.
It's something he always says, which is true. He got more votes than any sitting president, less than Joe Biden, though. So then he lost. But that's one of the things that makes it really hard for Trump supporters to believe Trump lost. But when there's record voter turnout across the board, Trump got a lot, but Biden got more. So he won. Well, okay. He got more and he got enough in the proper states to also win the Electoral College. And then him starting to talk about Alvin Bragg.
Our elections were like those of a third world country. And now this massive election interference at a scale never seen before in our country, beginning with the radical left, George Soros-backed prosecutor Alvin Bragg of New York.
I would say it would be fun for people to play a drinking game where every time George Soros is brought up in response to Trump's indictment, you drink, but that would be genuinely life-threatening if you played that game, because George Soros is a name that is always in their mouths. And then he calls for Alvin Bragg to be prosecuted.
Indictment together. Came out today, everybody said, this is not really an indictment, there's nothing here. My lawyers came to me and they said, there's nothing here, they're not even saying what you did.
Falsified business records?
The criminal is the district attorney because he illegally leaked massive amounts of grand jury information, for which he should be prosecuted, or at a minimum, he should resign.
So, of course, pulling it out of his you-know-where that Bragg leaked grand jury information. But that brings us to the part of this that was such a disaster for Trump, which is that he spent way more time than you'd expect talking about all the different investigations into him. Not just the one he's been indicted for, that case. And this is, if you were to be advising him, if you're thinking strategically on his part, so backwards, because what is he trying to do? He's trying to frame this indictment as political persecution, right? A witch hunt. And so presumably people are tuning in, and some, you have your people who no matter what won't go for that narrative. You have some people who no matter what will go for that narrative. And you have some people who are open-minded, you moderate Republicans who are thinking maybe this is a witch hunt. It's a lot harder to believe this is all a coordinated effort by the Democrats, or it's all a big political persecution of Trump, when you start thinking about all the different possible crimes he's committed based on all these different investigations, right? Okay, is everything just an attempt to take down Trump, or maybe he actually did some things wrong? And he highlighted that point. He made it harder for people to believe his dishonest narrative by walking through his grievances with these different investigations, starting with this.
Local racist Democrat district attorney in Atlanta, who is doing everything in her power to indict me over an absolutely perfect phone call, even more perfect than the one I made with the president of Ukraine. Remember, I kept saying that's a perfect call. This one was more perfect. Nobody said, sir, you shouldn't say that. Many people on the phone. Well, local racist Democrat.
So that's him referencing the Georgia investigation into his attempts to overturn the 2020 election. So crucial he's held accountable for that. We're watching the Georgia case very closely. And then here's him bringing up the document case.
Everybody was in shock. Nobody had ever heard of such a raid before. Can't even believe it. Who would think that that could happen today? I immediately thought of the Fourth Amendment that protects against unreasonable search and seizure. But they did it anyway because our justice system has become lawless.
Him bringing up the Fourth Amendment is hilarious because when he's talking about unreasonable search and seizure, yes, that's why they went and got a warrant, went through the correct process to make sure it wasn't an unreasonable search or seizure. And then more on the documents case.
But isn't that real obstruction? That's obstruction. As president, I have the right to declassify documents, and the process is automatic. If I take them with me, it's automatic, declassify. Biden was vice president. He had absolutely no right to declassify as vice president. He doesn't come under the non-criminal Presidential Records Act. He comes under the very criminal Federal Records Act, unfortunately for him, but it's not going to matter because they don't follow the law, which has very severe penalties.
It's funny, the way that some of these statements, these false statements are conveyed, makes it where you just take it as a given that it's true. Like Trump, they're saying vice presidents can't declassify. That made sense to me. Okay, whatever. I didn't know the classification ability of a vice president before talking about the documents case. And I was like, okay, maybe that's true. But still, when thinking about comparing the two cases, as we'll talk about a little bit more in just a second, the obstruction is what makes Trump so significant. Biden immediately turned his documents over. But even that tiny detail, oh, okay, I mean, maybe that's true. And I look into it, oh no, vice presidents can declassify. Okay, just a random false detail that isn't even, again, relevant to why Trump's is so much more severe than Biden's or Pence's. The reason is because there seems to be evidence to prove obstructed. And we talked about recently the Washington Post highlighting some of that evidence that he knowingly withheld the documents from federal authorities despite them asking repeatedly for those materials, and had his lawyers sign statements saying things that weren't true and all of that. But what is so bizarre about that part of the speech, or much of the speech, is that he's doing the job of individuals like me who are trying to explain, no, it's not political persecution. Because he's going, guys, they're saying I committed this crime and that crime and this crime and that crime and this crime and that crime. They're all lying. It's all political persecution. And I think someone who's kind of on the fence would go, wait, all right, I was on board with the idea that Alvin Bragg going after you, is it that big of a deal, falsifying business records? But all that, really? That's what you're trying to sell me? Nah, I don't think so. And it's pretty bonkers that he chose to do that. But we'll end here with something I found pretty interesting. MSNBC decided not to cover the speech live while the other networks did.
Is making remarks tonight from his home in Florida. As far as we can tell, and what we were prepared for here, is that this is basically a campaign speech in which he is repeating his same lies and allegations against his perceived enemies. It is just getting started. So far, he's just giving his normal list of grievances. We don't consider that necessarily newsworthy, and there's a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things. So our deal with you is that we will monitor these remarks. If he does say anything newsworthy, we will turn them around and report on that right away. But for now, just know that it's happening and we're not taking it.
There we go. And I think that was a good decision because he can't be given constantly just big platforms, at least by those who would make the reasonable decision, big platforms to spread his lies. Now, I don't blame CNN, for example, as much here because this is history that we're watching. Now, if any random speech that they're going and broadcasting the whole thing, they're not doing this anymore, but unfiltered, that is not good. This I understand a little bit more, but I like that MSNBC made the decision to not allow him just to have this unfiltered platform. And instead, we'll show you the parts that are newsworthy. You can go watch it by yourself or on your own, anywhere you like, absolutely. But there's no reason to do that on Trump's part. So very interesting, wild speech. Make sure you are following me on Twitter, Luke P. Beasley.